I'm Jordan White, and this is a great opportunity for me, and I hope you guys will also feel it's a great opportunity for you to get connected with where we're at in the sheriff's race and where we're headed. I feel this is one of the most pivotal sheriff's elections that I've experienced, and I've been through this. Hopefully I'll be the fourth sheriff, but 3 sheriffs in Flathead County, as well as sheriffs in other counties that I followed through my career. And this year we have 4 highly qualified candidates that I feel are each going to produce different results for our community. So I'm creating as many opportunities as we can to get together. Tonight, I really want this to be about you guys, and I want to hear your questions. I've heard a lot as I've gone and spoken to people individually, but my vision for collaboration and just bringing different thoughts together is to share some different perspectives and also allow me the opportunity to balance some of those. I think accountability is one of the most important traits that a sheriff can have. Consistency. For me, knowing that when I say something, it's the way it is. I prefer that every one of my engagements, so far every one that group gathering I've had has been recorded. I am not worried about saying something and then saying something different later, because I believe as long as I speak the truth, that I will be able to stick to the narrative very easily. So I don't write my speeches in advance, because I don't believe that that's the way that the world works for the sheriff. We deal with our situations as they come up, and I want to speak from the heart. Through my intention tonight is for you to get to know me a little bit better. I'll share a little bit more of my story about my life and how I got here. It's been quite interesting, and I'm proud of it. I don't want to take a lot of time tonight, because I do also want to hear from you folks and begin to share some of the vision that I have for moving forward after the election. Before we really begin, I want to thank Vista and Alice Blaisdell Mark for opening up the facility for us, providing us food and beverages. I know that they somehow abandoned ship, but we have great support from an amazing community in so many levels, and this is just one more sign of people doing what they can with what they have to educate, to reach out and support one another. And I actually started my relationship back when Vista was down on the highway, like in 1987 or something like that. And as time has gone on, we've grown up. But 22 years ago, I had the opportunity, 21 years ago, to run the Far West. It was based out of Summers then, right at the dock down the hill. And it was my second opportunity to run a business. And that was when Alice came alongside me. She was catering on the Far West a lot then, and said, I want to help you be successful, because I see I can teach you a lot of things about business. I've been around enough and been on this boat enough that I can help you. She changed my life. She was a great mentor. And I appreciate that she's not doing that just for me, but any candidate that wants to be here has that same opportunity from her. So when I talk about my story and connecting the needs of the people at the heart of the community, that is just one more example of what the heart of the community looks like to me. The rest, I want to thank my wife Natalie, friends and family who have said from the beginning, yes, you can do this, and we'll stand beside you as you go through this campaign and after the election when you're the sheriff, because I know I can't do this alone. My wife and I need your support. I don't want to do this alone, even if I thought I could. My vision for this campaign and for my future as the sheriff is to have a relationship with the community that I lead and represent, but it's truly the heart of the community that I'm leading. I'm not trying to lead the sheriff's office. As far as my concern of the sheriff's office, this is a a publicly held company and you're all investors and stakeholders in this company, and you have the opportunity to hire a CEO that's going to run this company wisely, fiscally, you may not want to know about buying new computers and updating the phone system for the system to work properly, for the organization to flow. But you certainly expect when you appoint a leader to lead that office that the safety and security of the community are put first. And we do that by taking care of the members of the organization, that we have a plan to anticipate what's going to come down the road next. And one of my favorite duties of the many that the Sheriff's Office performs across the state, as well as in Flathead County, is they're responsible to lead the community, citizens in the community. And people may say that's the posse, but as far as I'm concerned, that's each and every individual that has something unique and special to offer, which we all do, to the Sheriff's Office and to the rest of the visitors and citizens of our county. So we'll get a little more into that, but just to touch on my background, many of you know me and some of you just met me tonight. Thank you for the opportunity. I had a different background, and I have a different approach to business, to the Sheriff's Office, to public safety because of it. And that is that I grew up in Big Fork. I had my first experience with public safety when I was hit by a car when I was 7. Come on in, find a seat, come on in. There's food, help yourselves, don't mind me. But what touched me then, what touches me through my career to today when I made the choice to run, is the fact that my second grade substitute teacher, as I attended Swan River School, would be the medic that would be taking care of me when I was hit by a car at 7 years old. She would not only take care of me then, but when I had a heart to serve the community at 18 and wanted to come back to Big Fork and be an EMT, that she was my mentor and my teacher. And after I became certified, she was my paramedic shift leader that I was on call with 1 week out of the month, and then during the day whenever I was available. And she had a long, long career. The same with the fire department. When our house burnt down when I was had just turned 11, it was below zero. It was miserable out, and I remember standing in the yard and seeing a firefighter fall off the roof of our house and injure his back. He still has that back injury today, and I remember it very vividly. Somewhere in between those, right after that, we began being homeschooled, and that wasn't because my parents were socially inept or I couldn't survive in school. It was because I was fortunate enough to have a mom, and I was raised by my stepdad at that time, that were committed to raising us differently than the world saw it at the time, which was my mom was well educated, and she felt that she had all the qualifications to provide the same quality education to me that any school teacher would, but in a much smaller class size and with much more attention, tailored specifically to my needs, their values, and my strengths in being able to address my weaknesses in a unique way. So from the 3rd grade through high school, I was homeschooled by through an accredited program called Christian Liberty Academy. So it wasn't, there was no internet then. We didn't even have a computer until, I think it was 19 when I touched my first computer. But it was a different beginning for me. And it created an opportunity for me to be curious, for me to look at relationships much differently. And when I went to work for the Amish colony in Libby when I was 14 years old, they actually came for my brother, and he was busy logging, so I got sent over to build log houses. That was my first real job, and after that I did a lot of other things until I went to Glacier Park when I was 17 and ran my first, it was a horse concession at Lake McDonald. I ran my first company there, had my first 6 employees and 54 horses underneath of me, and got to deal with my first bureaucracy as I supported the contract that he had with the National Park Service, and we supported about 150 folks from all over the world that would come to recreate and share the beauty of Glacier Park with us. That was what led to the beginning of the story when I ran the Far West, and that was exciting work for me. But it wasn't until I became an EMT and a firefighter when I was 18 years old that I found the job that I fell in love with. And it was the job that I felt that I would love to do for free, including when I went to work as a deputy sheriff, as a reserve deputy. I went on my 21st birthday because they wouldn't allow me to join a day sooner, and pestered the patrol commander then until he allowed me to pass all my testing, and I started my journey. I went to the Highway Patrol, was stationed in West Yellowstone for 2 years, had the opportunity to start new programs there, but my heart was always here in the Flathead Valley. I had great leadership. I understood more about my vision and my passion for my life as I experienced working with the state police, the local police, the National Park Service, as a commissioned ranger through the state. They had a relationship like that down there, and I knew that this is where I wanted to be. This is where I would continue my career climbing up, including through the rank of undersheriff, where I got to meet many of you through one capacity or another, and eventually pursued my greatest passion, which after seeing people suffer and die when they didn't need to, that what we lacked was something that we could create. And I had been successful in this point in working with then Undersheriff Chuck Curry and Jim DuPont with the dive rescue team, and learning how programs started. We saw an opportunity, I saw an opportunity to put a team of people together and pursue what would become Two Bear Air Rescue as we formed it through development. So that brings us to pretty much up to today. I resigned my position, maintained a lot of relationships to get us to the point that I had learned as much as I had learned about the sheriff's office. Then I stepped out of that to work with a small group of people to develop the whole program we would know today as Two Bear Rescue by working with groups from across the country, working with teams of people here that sometimes were a couple dozen, but reaching out to hundreds of people to do something that had never been done before. And during that time, I actually was still a volunteer with the sheriff's office, though I was paid separately by Mike Gogan, who saw the vision of what we could do together and felt like it wasn't a responsibility of a burden on the taxpayer to make that possible. So of my 19 years since I started in law enforcement, I was paid for 12 of them. I think that's a pretty good value to the taxpayer. As I look back at what I've been able to accomplish. But it's been purely a labor of love for me, and it's been an investment of years and years and years of mentors and coaches that have gotten me to the point that I am today. And some experiences that I look back very fondly on, and some that I'm not super excited about, because some of them weren't wonderful. If you Google my name, which I encourage you to do your due diligence on me, you'll see one of the first things that comes up is that I did sink a helicopter in Beaver Lake. It was a tragic event. I'm glad I survived, and I'm glad that I was able to continue on the vision and the passion that I had because of the experience. But those were all the pieces of my life that shaped me. And just like all of you, I've experienced loss, I've experienced tragedy, but I've chosen to mold that into something that I believe today gives us the opportunity to come together as a community and to charge forward and invest the things that we've learned as individuals and as a community together. I see more and have heard about more pain in our community that just breaks my heart as I've gone out and met with groups and met with individuals and met with families who say there's still so much work that needs to be done. And it's not that it's anybody's fault. And that's where I get into my vision and passion for the future of the Sheriff's Office, which is change. Not that it isn't great where it is today. Change, because change is inevitable in every area of our lives. No matter where we are or what we're going to do today, if we aren't anticipating, preparing, and activating change, then we're already in a losing battle. So from my perspective, we get to mold that change together, and I want to do it with members of the community, because I don't know enough. I don't have enough experience to be able to pull that all off by myself. And that was the point of inviting you here tonight, to begin that process of hearing thoughts from some of you and hearing your concerns, and then sharing my heart with you. And before we do that, I actually do want to share one thing, because this has been on my mind this week of what could I do for this one topic, because it's been something, I read it on the wall at the fire station. This is National Telecommunications Week. It's when we recognize our dispatchers. For those of us that don't have a regular interaction with public safety, you may not necessarily appreciate the challenges that they face of telling someone how to do CPR on a child, or listening as they wait for an ambulance to arrive and somebody's begging for their spouse to come back to them, or hearing gunshots in the background hoping that the officer picks up the radio and acknowledges their call. And as we look at one of the growths we've made, which I think was a huge opportunity for us when we created the 911 Center, we did something very bad to ourselves when we did that. And that is, we created an isolation that was almost unanticipated, because we took all the dispatchers from around the valley and put them in one central location. So they all had each other, but we pulled them out of their police departments and the sheriff's office, where they used to get closure and relationship with the officers that were out in the field dealing with these calls that they were taking. And they got closure, and they got to be part of the whole process. We put them in a separate building and isolated them from the rest of us. And we don't give them the support necessarily that we do. And I didn't realize it as much, even though I've talked to them and understand the struggles that they've had since that change occurred, until I read an email that they sent out that said, this year, the supervisor for the 911 Center said, we're not trying to get cookies or snacks brought to the 911 Center, but if you would please just write us a card or a letter and tell us something that we did right, tell us something we changed the community, something we did important, we would appreciate that. So one of the things I did is I actually went and picked up some thank you cards, because how many times would we read that and say, that's a great idea, but we don't actually do it? So tonight, I actually have homework for you guys, because as I want to engage you guys in the community, what a great way to set context by giving you all a chance to just write a rainy day note. I learned that in personal development. It's extremely important. We don't all have good days. But one of the ways that we can bridge the bad days is to actually have a note that you can open up and read that says nice things and reminds us that we have good days and bad days, and if we're in a bad day, good days come. So we have that. I would encourage you to fill those out. I'd like to deliver them tomorrow up there. So we'll do that in the end. But that's just what I imagine, how small a gesture it takes. When we look at ourselves and think, what can I do? I don't necessarily have that much skill. I don't have a passion to go out and engage the community with energy and some special talent. We can always do something. And when I read that email, what I read was what resonated with me from the time I wanted to start this campaign, is they're asking for love. That's what they want. Because they can't give from an empty cup. Nobody in public safety can give from an empty cup. And as I look at what we've done as a culture and as a society, we've created an isolation in our communities, in our schools, and with law enforcement and public safety, where we don't have that same relationship that we used to have, that we used to depend on one another, and we've created a space where we can just spin our wheels and we don't necessarily recognize the need and the opportunity. And we have several retired people that worked in law enforcement. And you can probably tell me as you read the stories today of violence escalating against law enforcement, how it breaks your heart. I was telling some folks that I met with today that I remember in Big Fork, back when I started on patrol, it was still a day when we would go to most calls by ourselves. It doesn't happen as much anymore because officers may not feel quite as safe to do that. But I felt safe back then to do it because I remembered one instance when I chased a young man on one of the longest foot chases of my life. It was around the 4th of July in Big Fork when things used to get wild. I chased him on this long pursuit up through town, through the residential area, around the school, back downtown, and finally tackled him in the street. So it was about a week later that I see him again, and he's got road rash. He's not drinking because he's been released with the order not to drink. So he's not drinking, but he's walking around downtown. And I was by myself, and I broke up a fight in the street, and these guys started to surround me and taunt me. And this young man, who I had just tussled with, comes out, and he stands beside me and says, "I have your back." And then he tells them, in no uncertain terms and words I would never be able to use as a professional, where to go and how to get there. We're friends today, but I remember looking at him later, I'm like, "Why did you do that?" I said, "I would have figured you'd be paying money to see the show." He said, "No, because you were fair." He said, "You gave me fair chase, and you caught me fair and square. What they were about to do wasn't fair." But when I look at our community, my heart for this community, when I meet with people and I meet all the organizations and the individuals and the groups and the members of the criminal justice system, they have that heart. They have a desire to work together. They want to be safe. They want to be secure in the community. And sometimes real or perceived, because we still get sucked into a world that's brought to us by the media and by social media and by everyone around us that may not be our reality. But the moment that we choose to step into that, we live it, and it becomes us. And no matter where we are in our lives, we will always have fundamental needs in our lives. Needs that will be met one way or the other through healthy choices or unhealthy choices. And whether it's for significance, connection, meaning, relationship, whatever those needs are, maybe they're met because there's a predator out there wanting to offer drugs. Maybe it's someone that lures them into a lifestyle just to be human trafficked. We have predators and we have victims in this world. We have bullies and we have people that are bullied. It doesn't matter how old we get or even what profession we're in. It's a reality that we live with. But the more isolated we get, the harder it is. And as I have met with families that have watched their kids get pulled away from them, they've seen that distance occurring, we make a difficult choice when we feel isolated, and that is, do I not do anything and try to salvage the relationship that I have? Or do I intervene and do I step forward and take a risk and potentially push that person further out of my life? And because they feel so alone, very often they make the choice just to salvage the relationship they have and lose that connection that they have, because it's inevitability. All we're doing is prolonging a pain instead of confronting it. But when we get together and we have these opportunities as a community to gather around, we begin to realize that we're not in this alone. How many people in here have raised kids, teenagers? It's been miserable, right? At various points, but you also knew probably by talking to other families that they experienced misery too. And that some of those pass, some of it's natural, some of it's not. Well, it's the same way when what I'm realizing is we deal with families that have struggled with addictions. They've been consumed by those different struggles. They worry. We worry about things we may not even need to worry about. We worry about our liberties being taken away from us or being walked on. And we have to deal with those concerns because they're real. but that becomes our focus instead of necessarily being able to support one another. So that's I'd like to expand more, but I want it to be based on questions. Does anyone have any question, a topic that I can address for you that's been on your mind?
And people on Facebook that are watching too. There's a bunch on here.
Oh, cool.
They could ask questions.
Thank you. Hello, and thanks for tuning in.
Feel free to ask questions.
Yeah, type them. Natalie will tell them. No questions? I'm going to jump on one of the biggest hot buttons that we face in a community, because I've had a chance to talk to both sides. My job as the sheriff, I feel, is to keep the peace and ensure that we have the safety and liberties to exercise our constitutional rights of expression and protection. But very often I'll meet with one group of folks that are concerned because there's a new abortion clinic opening, and they don't want it to be targeted. They don't want there to be violence and a threat against that. And they have concerns. Sounds like we have a fire call. At the same time, and I address that very cleanly. For one, we have rights. There is an opportunity to protest things that we don't agree with and don't believe in. We have the right to do that and not be bullied, and we affect change in many ways. But at the same time, we live in a community that treasures our freedom. I tell people I was raised to love God, guns, and freedom. In that order, pretty much, because the one protects the other, and the one protects the other too. But for me, as I meet with people, they say, Jordan, how do you feel about guns? I filled out more questionnaires probably on that topic as a candidate than almost anyone, because we have a lot of heat on that subject right now from related to school safety and groups. It's also the area here that we have changes coming regarding concealed weapons permit. And I think back to an article right when I started in law enforcement that highlighted the sheer volume of concealed weapons holders in Flathead County. And Jim DuPont was being interviewed as the sheriff, and he said, how does that make you feel? And he said, safe. I couldn't agree more. I've met a lot of crazy people in my career. They're crazy whether they're one way or the other and they need help. But the last thing I would ever do is want to say that we need to make a blanket decision that affects everybody because we've experienced somebody that's suffering from a true mental illness that does need help. But if I have a relationship that's open and our law enforcement professionals can get behind issues in the community like mental health, and we know that we can trust our public safety professionals to deal with these issues for what they are, then maybe we'll find out about them earlier and not have to wait for something potentially bad to happen for it to blow up. Our Second Amendment rights shall not be infringed. In my opinion, as a professional in law enforcement, I have always felt safe when I have known that someone in the community sees me as theirs, who sees the sheriff's office as theirs, and will do their part to protect me and protect it, and the whole peace, freedom, liberty, joy that it represents when we have our deputies that live in our neighborhoods, that we have the safety that comes from them coming into our businesses freely and coaching Little League and being involved in our schools. And those are the ways that our citizens and our public safety professionals, whether they're in fire, medicine, or law enforcement, have a relationship with one another. None of them should ever have to feel bad that they're going into public and don't want anyone to know that they're a cop. Maybe they have to go to a different store now and then. That's realistic, and that's something that happens. But under me, that should never be a concern. And if it were ever a concern, then I would be calling on all of you to help me address it. So no matter what changes in the world with different viewpoints, mine will always be in the defense of the Constitution with regard to our right to own and possess firearms. And I appreciate the fact that we live in a society that's safe because we take care of each other. I would prefer that we all look after ourselves and each other as protectors. 10% of our population in Flathead Valley is veterans. In some regard, we should be taking much better care of them, but we should also allow them to take better care of us by recognizing them, seeing opportunities for them to serve. And there's a lot of solutions. Because should we arm our teachers? Well, I actually know teachers who are veterans who would do anything to stop anyone that would hurt one of our children. And they would say, pick me for training and any hoops I have to jump through to be able to protect our kids. I would support legislation that would give that person and that school at the state level the resources and tools to be able to do that when I already know, and they've done it many times before, we've had people jump in front of bullets to protect our kids. I believe they should have the tools and resources and training to do it if they already know they're going to do that. But I would never want someone who knows they don't want to carry a gun, knows they would never use deadly force against another human being, to feel the pressure and responsibility to go through the training and requirements and then possess that responsibility on top of the responsibility they already have to take care of our kids. That's clear? Can I answer any? Yes.
That sounds like common sense to me.
Well, it sounds like common sense to me, but it seems to be very difficult for many people in our country to wrap their heads around that.
I understand.
But I don't think it's very difficult to get there.
No.
I do believe it's the responsibility of the sheriff, if that law is passed and that decision is made, to support people in the community with the training and resources to understand. That's not complicated either, because they already have in-service training. They already are held to a standard in so many different areas, providing additional use of force training, working with county prosecutors to understand the ramifications of making one of those choices. We even have the curriculum built in things like the Reserve Academy for reserve deputies, that it's already been done and tested and proven that it works, to take snippets of that and make it available. Should we succeed in going down those roads, I believe it's my responsibility to make the resources and staff from the Sheriff's Office available to support that. Go ahead.
You mentioned the county attorney. Explain to us what you believe your relationship is with our county attorney.
Well, we're getting a new one, and when I look at the criminal justice system, you may call me one of the most optimistic people in the world, but I will approach this from that position because I believe that it's achievable, and I'll deal with the consequences later if it isn't. But we have the opportunity to create a synergy within our criminal justice system that allows our deputies in the field and police officers to investigate crimes, prepare them for packaging, have a county attorney that supports us in preparing those cases for trial and prosecution, and helping us get that case ready in a fair, legal way that's fair to the suspect and fair to the victim and to the community, to the judge for prosecution. I don't, right now, believe that we can just stack cases up and stall justice, because part of that system doesn't work. And I know that, and I hear complaints that happens, that justice isn't served because either it takes too long for that cycle to occur, and there are a lot of reasons for that. We can talk about, the jail usually comes up about now. But that process where we back cases up through the county attorney's office that they don't get handled, or there isn't any resolution, isn't acceptable. And we have to find a way to work around that. Because it doesn't matter if the sheriff's office does the best job we have in the world if we can't ever bring cases, or all of our cases, through to the full justice of being judged. So do I know necessarily can we convene a grand jury to overcome and bypass the prosecutor if we're not in agreement? I don't know that that's necessary, but I'm not willing to let it stall to the point that we become ineffective in delivering justice in the community. We can't just arrest people and kick them back out on the street because they don't go through the full system.
Which brings up another question, if you don't mind, incarceration. What's your feelings on that? And of course, you look at our supposed freest country in the world, incarcerates the largest percent of the population as well as the largest population on planet Earth, as far as countries are concerned. I really struggle with, we want bigger jails to incarcerate more people when I feel there's a lot of victimless crimes that people shouldn't need to be locked up into a cage at our expense.
Well, one of the challenges that I look at when we look at our jail system, we've done well. We had a 70% increase in capacity because of the last expansion of our existing jail facility. I agree with you that we have a lot of clogged up time spent trying to get these cases through the legal system, and we have cases that could be served other places. And I just talked today with an attorney who's very actively involved in creating drug court. Our drug epidemic in this valley is tearing the fabric of families and our community apart, and it's just trashing our jail system, our criminal justice system, and everything else. And it is creating a lot of backlog in every other area of criminal behavior, including property crimes and crimes against people, besides the drug crimes themselves. So if we begin to address these as a whole and focus on the individual and not coming up with blanket solutions saying we can arrest someone and if you get arrested for this crime, you're guaranteed to serve this time. I think we do need to look at individuals again to understand why that it occurred in the first place and what is the most effective means to deal with them. I don't think that locking people up and just putting off the problem, I mean, eventually people will change either because they are incentivized to change or they don't want to pay the price and experience the pain of not changing anymore. So one of the biggest challenges, and there's a mental aspect to every one of these that occurs, which is to ask the question of why, and to understand and realize that when we figure out that why and we can rehabilitate that person, what is their risk of reoffending, and can we get them some help mentally and anticipate their likelihood of those crimes recurring to keep them from just going back in and out of jail. And I've certainly arrested the same person over and over and over again for different offenses and had them serve the same penalty over again. That doesn't work because they're obviously okay with that price to pay as a penalty. And we know that fairly quickly. It usually occurs either the person goes in once and never wants to go back, or they really don't mind. And results matter. So the results that someone produces in their life, including me and mine, are the best measurement that we have to determine that. And that takes some of the judgment out. Sorry. But when you look at the results, they don't lie. Often harsh, always fair. So when we sit down and say, what is going to make the difference, that's what we should look at, not what studies say or what they say will change them or what they won't do again. We can look at their lives and begin to determine what steps to take. But one, we have to realize what's not working and stop repeating the same cycle over and over again expecting different results.
We have a couple of Facebook questions. Do you support a drug court?
Oh, absolutely. And that may even come up before I finished answering that. But when we look at the things that work with kids, and I know that kids are a completely different story, but when we started to focus on more than just the fact that a crime occurred and look at what were some of the contributing factors and what are some of the other prices that could be paid, other than serving jail time to correct that course and bring it back in. I certainly know criminals that still have a child's mentality, and you can tell that by some of the life choices they're making. There's plenty of opportunities when we look at other means of justice, including drug court, and even they've had to deal with DUIs differently because we just have had the same reoccurring problem over and over and over again, looking at these things differently. And it's one of the best sources of information that I've experienced is people that have been through it. When I talk to people about the drug problem, if you get a different answer from somebody that's experienced it and been addicted and recovered from it than somebody that's been highly educated in what the correct process should be. And very often, those don't line up. I think we need to include both of those and also create opportunities for people that have experienced it, families that have experienced it, to provide input into the solution, to custom tune it to our community and find out what exactly works. I want to try as many new things as we can, and I know there's people that want to step forward and want to provide their expertise or their experience to make that possible.
Okay, and the other question is, do you have the support of the sheriff deputies?
I have that's a great question, and I have the support of some of the sheriff's deputies. And I would guarantee you, so do the other 3 candidates. I've certainly heard it said that all the deputies support one candidate. That can't possibly be true because we have multiple deputies who are candidates running, and we all are running because we believe we have the right stuff and the best solution to face these problems that our community faces. I certainly believe that. And what the culture is right now, and a culture I hope to change, is one where people don't feel necessarily that they have the option to express their support for whichever candidate they would choose without some retaliation. And I have encouraged deputies to do their job, focus on what's important, take care of their families. I know that this process, this election of getting a new boss or potentially a new boss every 4 years is one of the greatest challenges that any deputy faces in their career. Because we don't like to change. And when a new deputy comes in, or a new sheriff comes in, they almost always change something. They even change shifts. And that disrupts an already uncertain life for our deputies. I don't want to create any unnecessary uncertainty for our deputies. I already know they have a tough job, they work hard, and that's why the deputies that have supported me and offered their input into my campaign, I encourage, just go do a great job. Do a great job right now. Do a great job if I'm elected sheriff. Do a great job for our community if someone else is elected sheriff. Because their first and foremost job is to serve the public. Meanwhile, us candidates are going to get up here and we're going to share our vision. The only thing that separates us is our standards, our strategies, and our beliefs. We all have experience that varies, but those standard strategies and beliefs are going to be the things that we employ to affect the emotional experience that we get from talking to all the voters and getting constant feedback. One of the things that my first step would be for the ones that don't support me and support another candidate, it doesn't mean they don't really support me, they're just choosing to support another candidate, is that one of the first priorities that I would have as going in as the sheriff is to conduct an internal and external needs assessment, to understand what is working in the sheriff's office and what isn't. I don't want to change anything that's already working. If it's working, we need to do more of it. If they feel that there's something we could be doing differently, then I want to talk about it, and I want to look at what their ideas are. I value their input, and I value the input of people from outside the office that would share their experience with us too. I want to break down the silos that separate us. But what I do know, having been through several elections myself, is that there is a time of healing that always comes afterwards. There is a time of adjustment, of sharing, and the pressure that comes from these. Certainly there is some pain and frustration that some people choose to carry the rest of their lives. I hope in this campaign there isn't any. I hope that everyone is able to let this go back to their jobs, their families, their children, and their sports after June 5th, and jump in with both feet, knowing that they will have an effective new leadership in the sheriff's office, and very little of that affects their ability to go out and provide extraordinary service to the public, because that's what they expect and deserve. Go ahead.
What makes you the best candidate for sheriff?
Thank you for asking that question. When I look back at my life and what I've experienced, for one, there's 3 types of information in the world, as far as I'm concerned, and if you followed me, you know what I'm about to say. But there's what you know, what you don't know, and what you don't know that you don't know. For me, one of the greatest challenges and benefits of my curiosity in my career and in my life has been moving every possible piece of information that I can from the I don't know it category over to the choice of whether it's something that I can apply to my life and learn more about it, or if I can choose to put it in the I don't know about a category, but I know it exists and there's people out there that know a lot more about it than me, and I want them in my life taking care of it. When I look at every step that I've taken from the very beginning of my career, and I go back to something I said earlier, it's about results matter for me. I wouldn't be comfortable standing in front of the voting public saying, I'm your guy, if I hadn't already had the experiences of trying the new things and testing my theories to see if they work. One of them I mentioned earlier, one of the first ones I encountered after coming back to the sheriff's office from West Yellowstone was seeing a need for a dive team. And it wasn't just my seeing it. At the time, Under Sheriff Curry and I were both experiencing it because we'd had 6 days of misery diving without the extra support that we wanted and needed. And we saw a hole. And there's an opportunity that I had to say, you know what? Somebody should fix that. But I didn't even think to do that. I said, how do we fix that? And I looked around me and thought, I'm a diver, and I learned to dive with a whole bunch of divers who love to dive, and they're out diving all the time. And when I look at public safety dive teams, they don't do very well because deputies came to be deputies. You can only add so many collateral duties before you push past the capacity of what works by buying them equipment, paying for their training to use it, and then maintaining their currency, and then having them available when you need them. So we talked to Sheriff DuPont and said, what could we do? Would you support us doing a volunteer dive team? And he did. So we went out and recruited 15 divers who were very experienced, who were highly trained. Our first team of 15 people had anywhere from like 10 to 30 years of diving experience. I think it was a combined like several hundred years of diving experience that we brought. They all had their own equipment. They were passionate about diving. They dived regularly, so keeping their skills up wasn't difficult. We added 1 extra training for them by taking them diving once per month to add specific skills to us. And we gave them an opportunity and an outlet to do something they were passionate about and give back to a community doing what they already knew how to do, were equipped to do, and just needed the authority to do it. And the rest of us, we just stepped back, and they just show up and work. And when I say that we're going to bring a community together, that's what I'm talking about. I know there are people because I've been talking to with them and to them and receiving from them for the last year that I've planned this campaign, hearing them say, choose me. I have this to offer and I want to give it because I don't want to be a cop. I don't want to be a deputy, but I know I have this special skill that I can give. And I've seen that before. I've used it before, and our community's benefited from it before. And most importantly is I'm willing to believe in the impossible. There was a time, it was when I was the undersheriff, and I was actually banned from saying the word helicopter. I wasn't banned. I was given a quota of how many times I could say that per week before I would get in trouble. Because I believed that we had, and I had pictures of gyrocopters like hidden in my desk. I believed, because of 3 years in search and rescue and working as a community resource deputy and teaching realtors how to protect themselves, ladies, as they're going out and doing this, I'm hearing from all these things, but I'm seeing this one unique need that kept coming back and back and back and back, and that was, we need a helicopter. And there's no way we can afford it, and no matter how many houses I build and flip, I can't pay for it. I'd already taxed out everything I had. And when people looked at me, they said, "You're crazy, and you won't be able to do it." I went and joined committees at the state level in Helena. I went before the legislature. We passed new laws to change funding for search and rescue. I sat and reviewed that, and I looked at it, and there was still no way to do it, but I wouldn't give up on that dream, and I didn't believe it was impossible. 2 guys told me it wasn't impossible. Others said it would be crazy if you did it. Others said it's probably not possible. But only 2 guys said yes, it was. They were both, one was in his 70s, one was in his 80s, and both said, "I know you can do it because we did I did," and each one of them individually said, "I did the impossible because what I wanted to do, somebody said couldn't be done, and I did it. So if you believe you can do it, then I'm going to say you can do it. And I have no idea how you're going to do it, and I'm not going to give you any money. But what I will do is tell you that you can do it. And I'm going to tell you my story so you understand what I did and what I went through to accomplish what people told me was impossible." So I learned their strategy, and it still didn't work. So I finally said, okay, I need more. I went to school, and I went to an advanced leadership academy on my own dime in California. And I went down, and the lady that was the facilitator said, "What do you want out of this class, Mr. White?" There were 78 of us. I said, "I want to start a first of its kind, never created public-private philanthropic helicopter program for my community." And she said, "Good. At the end of the week, you'll know how to do that." Okay. At the end of the week, I left. I drove back to Montana before I hit the Oregon line. At 8 hours of driving, I had created a 30-year business plan on how that was going to happen. I got back. I put together a team of people. We flushed out all the issues. I took it to one person, sold it to him. That was Mike Gogan. He said, "That's crazy, but I'm willing to believe in you." He's like, "I can see the need. I have no idea how you're going to do it." But the point is I actually didn't do much at all. All I did was believe that the impossible was possible. I found the people who knew how to put the pieces together and would support me and each other in the building of that dream. And it's alive and well today without me. Everything that I have designed and created can function just fine without me. And I believe that's because at different points in my life, people ask me, "Jordan, what do you want to do?" And at 18, I wanted to be a helicopter rescue swimmer with the Coast Guard, but I didn't want to leave, so that didn't happen. I wanted to be a deputy. I wanted to be an EMT. I wanted to be a firefighter. I wanted to be on SWAT. I wanted to be a field training officer. I wanted to be a first-line supervisor. I wanted to be the undersheriff. I wanted to be a helicopter pilot. I wanted to own my own airplane. But it wasn't until I had been tested and pressed in my life until I matured to the point that I am today, where if you say, "Jordan, what do you want today?" I want to live a constant and never-ending improving life. I want to be my best, which isn't, I won't achieve my best today because my best tomorrow is going to be different than today. It's not about the individual accomplishments. It's not about the individual titles. It's not about the things that I can acquire in my life anymore. Because I have learned through enough loss and enough tragedy in my own life that the very best that I can do is going to never stop growing until I breathe my last. And I have no idea when that's going to be. But I fell off a roof this week. I landed on my head and I'm still here. Recovered quickly. I survived a helicopter crash, getting hit by a car, rolling a car, a few other weird and crazy things. I've lost people near and dear to me. And each person that I've shared my life with and lost has taught me how much more I have to give than what I've given yet. I want to pass that on. I want to teach the person in career day that there are dreams possible, but they're going to have to work for it. I want the young deputy who says, I have a great idea to make our community safer, to say, bring it to me. I'll teach you how to write a policy. I want to be that leader that mentored me through my career that said, that's a great idea, you do the work. I remember the unique things people poured into me. You know, I actually learned what the difference between a department and an office the day I wrote the first dive team policy that said Flathead County Sheriff Department dive team. I took it in, was so proud. Jim looked at it and he threw it back at me and said, the day that I actually work for somebody, this is a department. He says, you change that to office because I'm an elected official. I answer to the people. You answer to the people, so change that name and bring it back to me. He wouldn't read it. So I had to change the name and bring it back. But I follow in a long line of people that saw potential in me at the very beginning of my career and all the way through it to learn the things about helping people, about taking the experience that I had in emergency medicine and applying it as a deputy coroner, to seeing the opportunity I had in public safety and applying it to learning about business. To have someone take me under their wing and say, I know you're going to do this, but you're not ready to do that yet. But we have several other startups I'm going to put you into so you can learn how finance works and how money flows and how to use your resources there. So when your helicopter program's ready, you will know how to do that. So that's what I bring to the table, is a very diverse background, and not a single one of the skills I acquired through the whole process is going to be overlooked as a sheriff. Anybody else? No questions?
When you became under sheriff, what surprises were thrown your way that you would never have anticipated until you held that office? And how can that help you for the next one if you become sheriff?
You know, when we move into the things that move stuff from the I didn't know it category, I had to overcome one of the greatest challenges of my life, and I'm really glad that I had the opportunity then under a mentorship, because one of the greatest challenges I faced that I didn't anticipate is the relationships changed. The relationships changed significantly with my coworkers, with the public, and with my fellow administrators by moving into a box with a door on it. I didn't change. I would go back out and I would talk to my old partners and I would say, yesterday I was the same guy, but I was different because I had a different title. I had a different responsibility. And I didn't get to be one of the guys anymore. And at first I didn't understand what that meant. But very quickly I understood that it's a good thing. Change is inevitable. I received the greatest compliment that I could have gotten unexpectedly by meeting with someone who just wanted to ask me some questions. And that is that it had been said that I changed. I wasn't the same guy I was 6 years ago. And I thought about that for a couple days, and the more I thought about it, the more I thought, thank God. Because I am absolutely not the same guy that I was 6 years ago. I have grown in so many areas in my understanding of myself, my compassion, and my understanding of real legitimate fears that other people have in their positions and with their responsibilities. And realizing that it's okay if people treat me different because I have a different title. Because my status in the community has changed. I already understand and anticipate that that image is going to change. It changed when I announced my candidacy to be sheriff. as much in some ways I tried to keep my relationships the same, so many of them changed. And most of them changed for the better. Because I knew that it permissioned me to share my heart in a way that I hadn't shared it before, because I didn't realize that people really cared. People really care. And I know tomorrow will be different too. And I'm glad. I look forward to it. Anyone else? No more questions from Facebook?
No.
Are we doing time? Oh boy. Okay, well we're good. I didn't want to keep you all night. I promised till 7, and we're almost there. I could spend the rest of the night talking about what I'm passionate about. I just hope you hear the most important part, that if I could choose one thing I want you to walk away with tonight, is my understanding that the sheriff's office belongs to each one of you. It belongs to each one of you who choose to accept it as yours. You have a voice, not just during campaign season. You have influence all the time. But it's here to meet your needs, to meet the community's needs. And no matter who gets elected, I hope it's me, I trust that you'll have a sheriff who's going to hear your concerns and thoughts and value your input and your opinions. That's my expectation of the sheriff's office for you all as shareholders. Because when the sheriff calls on you, as his responsibility is to call on the people and organize them as needed. And in my career as a search and rescue guy, the absolute most chaotic crisis I ever had to deal with was over 300 people in Evergreen looking for a missing 3-year-old. That was my first opportunity to appreciate what it means in the sheriff's responsibilities under Montana Code Annotated to lead the people. There's a picture, we found it as we were putting together the website. It's too blurry to really see, but I was standing on the back of a sheriff's boat. I don't even know why it was there. I don't even remember how it got there. But we're standing on the boat because I had to get up high enough. We didn't have speakers to be able to address this growing crowd of several hundred people who all came together and said, we're going to find this little boy. We are going to put it together. We are yours. That's the kind of horsepower the community comes together with. So, yes, there'll be new technology. There will be new jails built. There'll be new patrol cars. The graphics will change. The letterhead's going to change. But what won't change is your roots, your values, what you value in your lives and in your families, and your desire to see that protected. So when we double down on that and we call on people in the community, and I know many of you are prepared to be called on, however that looks. Some people will do anything, some people will do something. But I actually have met very few people, most of them were in jail, who would do nothing. And there's a place for them too. But as a community, we get to make that choice. We get to make that choice on June 5th, which is not very far away. And here's what saddens me, and I'm going to ask for your help with this. That decision typically gets made by less than 10% of our population in our community. That decision, in my opinion, should come from folks who feel that they've been informed and that they're making the best choice from the candidates who stepped forward and said, choose me. Not because you liked what I said, but because what you believe that I will protect your values and serve you the best. We don't get to have 4 sheriff's offices. This isn't even a tougher race than the Olympics because there's no silver and there's no bronze. There's one guy gets the gold out of this, and who gets that gold is purely dependent on who engages. And there's a small group of people here when you think of the total number of people in our community. Hundreds more will have the opportunity to connect because there's a video of it. But each one of you actually has the most influence of all of the technology in the world because it's a relationship. So I hope you'll do what you can, you'll connect to who you can to share your experience because you chose to be here tonight or with any of the other candidates and share any of the experience they had. It's a privilege to be in the position to be able to meet new people and to talk to you and actually stop by and visit old friends. This dropping off political signs is a real hoot. They're all elements of this, and I've heard it said that you know, people, whoever has the most signs out will win, and I refuse to believe that. I refuse to believe that any more than I believe it's impossible for us to have a first of its kind public-private philanthropic helicopter in our community serving us. So, any last questions? No? One of the things that I was proud of as the undersheriff, and that I'll be real proud of as the sheriff, is you don't have to agree with me to have a meeting with me. I don't have to agree with you for you to come in and have a meeting with me. I did escort one person out of the office forcefully because it just didn't work out. He came back the next week and we've been friends ever since. Because I believe that that's what we all deserve, the right to be heard, especially when we elect someone to represent us. How that looks is individual to every one of them, so I figured who's the easiest person to decide who to meet with? Everybody is the best choice for me. It may be different for other people. But with that, I'll close. Thank you all. Please finish up the hors d'oeuvres. They do expect them to be eaten. Any last ones?
Fill out cards.
Oh yeah, and there's thank you cards. If you don't mind, say something nice. You don't need to know who you're writing it to. It's that imaginary person that answers the phone hundreds of times per day dealing with somebody's crisis. And hopefully not ours, but many of you probably experience that. So take a few minutes. There's pens, cards, and you're free to leave as soon as you've voluntarily done that. Thank you.